Susan Boyle vanished for 2 years, following a horrific incident in 2022. She was concealing more than just that secret, though. For years, she had been torn apart by her own family over money. Susan became really anxious after one of the brothers even threatened her. Her decision to provide $1.8 million to family members only made matters worse. At 64, Susan has at last made a startling admission about what actually transpired during those troubled years. On April 1961, Susan Boyle was born at Bangor Village Hospital in West Lothian, Scotland. She came from a working-class family and was the youngest and ninth child. Bridget, her mother, gave birth at the age of 47, which was dangerous for a pregnancy, particularly at that time. Physicians cautioned that the baby's birth could put the mother and kid in danger. However, Bridget, a devoted Catholic, would not entertain the idea of terminating the pregnancy. Susan's arrival put more strain on the Boyles, who already had a hard time making ends meet in their modest Blackburn house. Susan was the odd one out from the beginning, which paved the way for many of the challenges she would encounter. Crisis characterized Susan's early years. At birth, her mother experienced pre-eclampsia. Susan's oxygen supply was momentarily cut off as a result. Her parents were informed by doctors that she was born with slight cerebral impairment. For years, this label followed her. She was referred to as a slow learner at school. She had trouble keeping up. Teachers were unsure about how to help her. Susan felt as though she didn't belong after being made fun of by her peers. For the majority of her life, the thought that she was injured plagued her, nor was home a safe place. Patrick, her father, served during World War II. He was deeply scarred by the conflict. He was unstable and furious when he got home. Fear gripped the already impoverished and cramped Boyle household. Her father's violent outbursts frequently targeted Susan. She suffered psychologically as much as physically. Susan eventually declared her love for her father, despite her belief that he battled uncontrollable demons. However, the harm influenced her self-perception and made it difficult for her to trust other people. There was no escape from school. Susan was harassed every day. Her peers thought her fainting episodes amusing due to her epilepsy. They called her names like Tucci and Susie Simple, which were harsh. Teachers were of no assistance. They struck her with a belt instead. Almost every day sometimes. Susan felt hurt, insignificant, and forgotten. Nevertheless, in spite of everything, this challenging upbringing gave her an inner resilience that nobody anticipated. For over half a century, Susan endured a distressing miscommunication. From birth, everyone thought she had cerebral problems. She was viewed as less capable by her family, friends, and teachers. Susan saw a specialist in 2012 when she was 51 years old. She was horrified to learn the truth. Her IQ was above average, and she had Asperger's syndrome, a type of autism. The previous label was incorrect. Her difficulties were finally explained by this new insight. She felt proud and relieved. At last, Susan was able to see herself clearly and shame-free. Susan first experienced love at the age of 25, but her father intervened and ended it. Patrick broke up with Susan without telling her. One day, he picked up the phone and informed the man that she didn't want to talk to him. The man had a child with someone else shortly after. Susan's heart ached. That pain stayed with her forever. It permanently altered her perspective on trust and love. Susan remained behind as her 8 siblings left and started their own lives. She took on the role of caregiver for her elderly parents. She dedicated herself to her mother until Bridget's death, at age 91, following the death of her father in the 1990s. Susan's entire world shrank. She seldom ever saw her buddies. To take care of her family, she sacrificed her own aspirations. Susan felt stuck while her siblings established families and professions. She bravely tried out for the television program, My Kind of People, in 1995. Although Susan had performed in choirs and local taverns, this was her first opportunity to gain national recognition. There was too much nerves. She could hardly sing because she was shaking so much. She failed to appear on television. Despite being devastated by the rejection, she continued to pursue her ambition of singing at home and in small venues. Cry Me a River was recorded by Susan for a charity CD in 1999. There were just 1,000 copies produced. Nearly no one outside of West Lothian heard her performance, despite the local press praising her voice and calling it devastating. It would take 10 years for the world to learn about her gift. She used his tune to record Killing Me Softly and Cry Me a River. She sent the tapes to TV stations and record labels all around the United Kingdom. Nobody answered. The recordings vanished into thin air. Susan was devastated. No one seemed interested in listening to her. Susan Boyle's world collapsed in 2000. Everything changed when her adored sister Kathleen passed so unexpectedly. Susan's staunchest ally had always been Kathleen. Susan's dreams were crushed when she passed away. Susan had previously been performing in her little town of Blackburn, at church functions and smaller venues. She hoped to succeed in the music industry. But Susan stopped when Kathleen left. She was unable to sing. She didn't perform, take lessons, or even come in contact with anything that made her think of music for 2 years. She walled herself away because the sadness was so intense. The emptiness in her heart matched the silence in her life. Susan had always been pressured by Kathleen to share her talent, and suddenly that voice, the voice inside Susan, as well as the voice of her sister, was gone. By 2002, Susan had gradually returned to singing, but her world had changed by then. Her attention shifted to Bridget, her mother. Bridget was weak and in her late 80s. Every day, she required Susan's care. Thus, Susan centered her life on her mother and remained in the modest council home where she had been raised. She took care of Bridget, cooked, and cleaned. In exchange, Bridget offered words of encouragement that helped Susan maintain her aspirations. "You have a gift and you have to use it," she would remind Susan. Everything was divided between the two. Although they had a close relationship, it limited Susan's universe. The only thing that kept optimism alive was her mother's belief in her. Susan's own goals began to wane, but then she experienced yet another heartbreak. Bridget passed away in October 2007, at the age of 91. It felt like the end of the world for Susan. She had Bridget as her rock and anchor, and now she had lost that rock. Susan was devastated. Her singing ceased. She was rarely out of the house. She lived in grief and quiet for over 2 years. Neighbors and friends became concerned. Susan didn't appear to want to do anything anymore. With her mother's death, the dream she had once clung to so tenaciously seemed to disappear. There was just silence and grief in the house that had once been alive with music. Susan turned into a recluse throughout this period. Her entire existence revolved around the small Blackburn house. The curtains remained drawn. She was hardly seen by neighbors. Susan would go days without talking to anyone else. Most of the time, her only companion was her cat, Pebbles. She was not a churchgoer. She never went to events. She even lost interest in her appearance. Once a place of love, the house was now a place of grief. That remained the case until late 2008, when Susan started to feel something. Before she passed away, Susan had promised her mother something. She also made the decision to keep it in 2008. She would go to Britain's Got Talent to try out. Her age was 47. She had no job. She had never given a concert outside of her hometown. However, none of that was important. She was adamant about following her mother's instructions. After completing the form, she traveled to Glasgow to attend the audition. It was horrible. Despite her self-doubt, she went. That one act of bravery, that commitment, changed everything. She later stated, "I wanted to prove to myself and to everyone else that I could do it." It was the beginning of one of the most amazing tales in entertainment history. Nobody took Susan Boyle seriously when she took the stage on April 11, 2009, at Glasgow's Clyde Auditorium. She had untidy hair, wore a simple gold-laced dress, and was 47 years old. The audience members rolled their eyes. A few chuckled. Piers Morgan, Amanda Holden, and Simon Cowell, the judges, exchanged disbelieving glances. The group erupted in laughter when Susan declared her desire to achieve Elaine Paige's level of fame. People were seen whispering and grinning on camera. Before she even spoke, it seemed like everyone had already determined she would fail. Simon Cowell's mouth dropped when Susan started singing, "I dreamed a dream from Les Miserables," and everything changed. The room went silent. His gaze expanded. Amanda Holden gazed in wonder. Piers Morgan gave a startled smile. In a matter of seconds, the judges' doubts were replaced by awe. The audience leaped to their feet when Susan hit the song's most impactful section. The cheers were thunderous. Later, Simon claimed that he had never been so taken aback on the show. It turned into a viral success. The video evoked the same sense of wonder in millions of viewers worldwide. That evening's standing ovation extended outside the auditorium. Videos of Susan's audition were widely shared online by the next morning. Over 25 million people viewed it on YouTube in just 1 week. That figure soared above 100 million in just 9 days. She was covered by the New York Times, CNN, and the BBC. People all throughout the world have been moved by Susan Boyle's voice. People were reminded that genuine talent can emerge from any place. When what began as a single performance in Glasgow turned into a global sensation. Following the song's conclusion, Amanda Holden said something that had an international impact. "I genuinely believe that we were all acting very cynically, and I believe that's the biggest wake-up call ever," she remarked. People kept saying that quote over and over. Everyone was forced to consider how quickly they make judgments about other people. As a reminder that ability knows no bounds, no age, and no appearance, Amanda's remarks became a part of Susan's story. The audition came to represent the dismantling of superficial standards in the entertainment industry. Overnight, Susan's life altered. Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore were among the celebrities who tweeted about her. She was the top trending subject on Twitter by April 13, 2009. 1.5 million people watched her video every hour. She was invited to the Oprah Winfrey Show and made appearances on news programs. She was sought after for interviews by reporters from over 50 nations. In Blackburn, Scotland, even her church became a popular tourist destination. Where she used to sing, people traveled from as far away as Japan to watch her. Susan became a worldwide celebrity in a matter of days. On May 24, 2009, Susan made her comeback for the semifinals. She sang Memory from Cats this time. The pressure was enormous. The wait was made more difficult by the fact that she was the last performer that evening. However, the magic returned as she began to sing. The crowd applauded. Amanda Holden described it as utterly captivating. That evening, Susan received more votes than any other performer. Her initial audition wasn't a stroke of luck, as her performance demonstrated to the world. Susan was the overwhelming favorite prior to the May 30, 2009 final. The odds quoted by bookmakers were as low as 1.66. She was the subject of almost 75% of all bets. By then, around 200 million people had watched her audition. Pubs and community centers hosted viewing parties in Blackburn. For the first time, the performance was streamed live online due to the overwhelming demand. Everyone thought Susan would prevail, but the nation was taken aback by the outcome when the final ballots were tabulated. Just 20.2% of the 17.3 million viewers cast their ballots for Susan. Diversity, a street dancing ensemble, won with 24.9%. People all over the world felt the shock. Even in countries such as Azerbaijan, it was being discussed. On live television, Susan, who is always kind, applauded diversity. Many viewers were taken in shock when she added, "The best people won. They're very entertaining. Lads, I wish you all the best." Rumors circulated that Susan was furious backstage immediately following the performance. According to other accounts, she hurled water at a floor manager and rushed down the hallways yelling, "I hate this show. I hate it." It was said that crew members were taken aback. Although some of Susan's close friends and family claimed the allegations were overblown, the incident demonstrated the strain she was under and the difficulties of unexpected celebrity. The United Kingdom awoke to startling news on June 2009. After winning hearts on Britain's Got Talent, 48-year-old Scottish vocalist Susan Boyle was taken to London's Priory Clinic. This clinic wasn't your typical one. When they required assistance, celebrities and even members of the royal family went there. Only the previous evening, Susan lost the BGT final to Diversity in front of 3 million viewers. She was deeply affected by the loss. She tossed a glass at hotel employees, sobbed, and yelled, "I hate the show," before passing out. When paramedics arrived, they brought her to the hospital, stating that she was experiencing emotional collapse and weariness. Susan was well famous at that time. Over 220 million people had already viewed her audition, making it the 5th most viewed video on YouTube overall. Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister, even wished her a quick recovery. Newspapers ran the story on their top pages, describing it as a warning about the costs of instant celebrity and reality TV demands. There was more from the media. They bombarded Susan with incessant tales and inquiries concerning her psychological well-being. According to some sources, it was even deemed barbaric by competitor journalists. Her family was harassed by reporters who waited outside her house. To test what she would do, some were even sent on odd missions, such as feigning to pop the question. The intervening body was the Press Complaints Commission. They warned editors that this type of private invasion was prohibited by their code of conduct, particularly with regard to mental health. This incident turned into a crucial media ethics lesson. It demonstrated the perils and brutality of press interference. Simon Cowell understood behind the scenes that things had gotten out of hand. He offered to free a competitor from their tour commitment for the first time. He assured Susan's family that if she so desired, he would rip up the agreement. "She won't be coerced into stepping into the recording studio. I'll comply with Susan's wishes," he added. This was unprecedented in the realm of reality television. Typically, celebrities were forced to go forward with advertising and tours. This was one of the most difficult weeks of Simon's life, he subsequently acknowledged. He accepted responsibility, saying, "I'm the first to hold my hands up and admit I've made mistakes." His offer altered the way the industry viewed celebrity care. Susan's prolonged presence in the clinic was anticipated by all. However, she departed on June 4, 2009, a mere 3 days later. When she revealed she had joined the BGT tour, the public was taken aback. After all, she had little chance of recovering. Afterward, she talked about how afraid she had been in the clinic. There was no TV, no phone calls. She was self-conscious and felt isolated. She finally understood, though, that she was simply worn out and in need of rest. Her choice to return was interpreted as a show of strength. Her supporters and relatives were there to encourage her come back. Susan did not simply return. Everyone was in awe of her. On 20 of the 24 BGT tour dates, she gave a performance. Birmingham, Sheffield, Coventry, Dublin, Edinburgh, and Aberdeen were among the cities where she performed. She received standing ovations from the crowds. She appeared to be an experienced performer, according to reporters. For Susan as well as the audience, the tour was a wonderful success. The ascent to prominence of Susan Boyle seemed like something from a fairy tale. On November 23, 2009, she launched her debut album, and I Had a Dream About It. Nobody in the music industry was prepared for what came next. She sold 400 of Nathalow's 820 copies in the UK. In a single week, that beat the record set by the spirit of Leona Lewis. She actually sold more than the other 5 members of the UK Top 5 put together. The shock, however, didn't end there. In her first week, she sold 701,000 copies in the United States. It was the largest solo female artist debut since SoundScan started recording sales in 1991. In its first week, the album sold over 2 million copies worldwide. Susan sold more than 10 million copies globally by the end of 2009. That was more than Lady Gaga, Rihanna, or Eminem accomplished in that particular year. It became the most pre-ordered record in Amazon's history, due to the overwhelming demand. Some retailers were unable to keep it on their shelves at all. The fact that Susan had been an unidentified volunteer from a Scottish church only months prior made this even more incredible. That single record wasn't the end of her success. She became the first woman in UK history to have 3 straight #1 albums debut in less than 2 years. The Gift 2010, Someone to Watch Over Me 2011, and I Dreamed a Dream 2009 all soared to the top of the charts. Nothing like it had ever been done before, save by such iconic bands as the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. And Susan accomplished it at the age of 48, without the industry's years of training or grooming. The Gift even simultaneously topped the charts in the US and the UK. That was the first time a woman artist had ever accomplished that. Her ascent demonstrated that talent may defy all the conventions held by the industry. The resulting sum of money was equally astounding. Susan made $5 million in her first year. That would be almost $8.5 million now. Prior to all of this, she survived on disability payments while residing in municipal accommodation in Blackburn, West Lothian. Her debut album alone had sold over $9.5 million by the end of 2009. Before long, she had a net worth of $35.40 million. How a woman from a small Scottish village rose to become one of the top-paid artists in the world in only a single year captivated the world. Susan experienced what seemed to be the pinnacle of her life in 2012. She sang Mull of Kintyre for Queen Elizabeth II's Diamond Jubilee at Windsor Castle on May 13. As millions watched on TV, she was supported by the pipes and drums of the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards. She was performing for the Queen just 3 years after trying out for Britain's Got Talent. It was overwhelmingly applauded. After the show, she even had a meeting with the Queen. It demonstrated to many that Susan had developed into a genuine national treasure. Susan sold over 25 million records worldwide by 2021. 10 million of those were from her debut album. But her subsequent albums also continued to sell well. In the US, UK, Australia, Japan, and New Zealand, her records achieved multi-platinum status. In the US and the UK, I Dreamed a Dream achieved 4 and 7 platinum records, respectively. Many music stars with considerably lengthier careers were outsold by her. Even prior to her debut, she accomplished all of this without the help of a major label. However, Susan's unexpected wealth split her family apart behind the scenes. Her relatives attempted to meet in June 2010 to discuss the money she had given them. Not everyone was present. The absences exacerbated long-standing conflicts and caused division within the family. Between them, Susan felt confined. Even worse, in 2013 she told her brother Jerry, "I'm the bad one. It's all my fault." She even blamed herself for the aftermath. According to reports, Jerry had vowed to commit suicide, unless Susan handed him $50. So that he could rescue his company. Susan felt she had no choice but to provide the money. She was ill at the time, suffering from tonsillitis and a viral infection. Although Jerry eventually denied threatening anyone, the harm had already been done. This severely eroded the family's trust. Susan's deception of other family members exacerbated the situation. She told them that she couldn't stand to reveal the truth and that Jerry had blackmailed her. She broke down and confessed to fabricating the narrative when Jerry questioned her. All she wanted was for the fighting to end, but the wounds were simply made worse by the falsehood. When Susan handed a relative a sizable monetary gift in 2015, things reached a breaking point. Susan grew agitated and made an effort to get in touch after the relative failed to express gratitude. The cops became involved because her messages were seen as harassment. When they visited her, they requested that she cease communicating with the individual. The incident brought to light the pressure Susan was under due to her family issues and celebrity. She had donated almost $1.8 million to family members throughout the years. She gave $55,000 to each of her siblings, and an additional $55,000 to her nephew Alan for a business that failed in 2010 alone. She contributed $45,000 to another niece's photographic company. She provided family members with jobs and covered maternity benefits. Kirsty, her niece, even received 5% of the money made from her first 2 albums. However, the money caused the family to become more distant rather than closer. In December 2013, things drastically changed in Susan Boyle's life. She discovered something that completely altered her life at the age of 52. She had thought she had a learning handicap for decades. It runs out. She prioritized prudent decisions over extravagant spending, such as real estate and musical endeavors. She remained safe and near her origins as a result. It happened in April 2022. Susan suffered a stroke.